And welcome, everybody. It's another installment of JC and Morgan. JC Sherbert at 24/7 Sports, Mike Morgan at ESPN and the SEC Network. We continue this summer extravaganza. We were doing the quarterback derby for 5 weeks in a row. We got to move on to other positions, other people, other folks. And we continue with some of the fresh faces and voices on this particular segment. We'll get to SEC Media Days and a whole lot of our SEC spring meetings in Destin. And a whole lot of other stuff later on. But I want to introduce our guest today, somebody I've had the pleasure of working with both on the TV side and the radio side. You might know him from Baldy's Breakdowns, which has become kind of a social media phenomenon. He's also the top analyst for NFL on radio for Compass and has also done several college football games for both Compass and Fox TV. Played in the NFL for about a dozen years, played for Duke, offensive lineman. And like I said, a guy I've had a chance to work with on some NFL the last few years. And for my money, one of the best in the business on the analyst side, Brian Baldinger, who joins us now. Brian, how are you, my man?
Mike, it's good to be with you here. It's the calendar says it's early June, which means the football season's around the corner. So I'm getting pretty jacked up and heading to a bunch of OTAs here up in New York and Philly last week and Miami here this week. And so kind of seeing what I can see, kind of the new rosters, new coaches, new faces and different places right now. So it's been good. It's a good time of the year, man. I'm looking out at my ocean out here, Mike. I'm going to be diving in there at some point today. You know the location. So
at
some point today, I'm going to be in the water.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you follow Baldy on social media, you get information, you get breakdowns, and you get jealous because you look at Brian living his good life over there in South Florida, and you're just steps away from the Atlantic. And then I know from experience, you're not afraid to just go there and free dive like hundreds of yards off the shoreline. Sharks don't bother you, right? You just don't care.
No, I heard that there's this spot in Bimini that's just like infiltrated with sharks. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, I got to go. I expect to be in Bimini in the next 2 weeks. I just got to see, like, are they hammerheads? Are they tigers? Are they just little puppy nurse sharks? Like, what are they? We'll find out.
Yeah, you got to break it down. There's no doubt about that. One of the things, we talk about this podcast, we're all kind of football nerds, right? And I say that with pride. Like
sure.
we had the NFL draft not long ago. I know you were real busy with that for the NFL Network. That's the other part of your calendar that I didn't mention at the top. And I don't know what it is, but I've been doing this since I was like senior year in high school. I will watch every pick of every draft. And back then, it was just like a weird obsession. The draft was still a new phenomenon, and ESPN was covering it with Berman and TJ and all those guys. Now I do it, a lot of it, because what we talk about on this podcast, college fans have a place to be a fan of the NFL, even if you're not a fan of the NFL, because I love watching guys in college and we all like to play kind of like a fantasy GM, right?
Sure.
Project how they're going to go. So like, I think you and I, like, we would have a TCU K-State game, and I remember having Tyler Lockett, and I'm thinking, that guy's going to be an under the radar guy. Well, he's a 3rd-round pick, and he's still a hell of a player. And then you and I could do like a less profile game in the mean streets of Boca, a little FAU FIU Shula Bowl, and that Janu Smith seems like he's got a chance to play in the league. Sure enough, he's still in the NFL, and so it's fun to do that, and you take it to another level because you have the breakdown segment, and you put it on. You've got video, you hear your voice, and you're kind of telling people what you like about guys. You did that for this past draft. What is the joy you get out of doing that?
Well, first of all, Mike, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. And at the NFL Network, where I work, Daniel Jeremiah is our lead analyst. He's excellent. He's been trained by Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore, Howie Roseman in Philly. He's been in Cleveland. I mean, he's a well-trained analyst and scout. And I tell DJ all the time, we could do draft 24/7. Like, I know you just went around, you saw spring football. I mean, you could talk Caleb Williams right now as much as you could talk any quarterback in this league. Or you go to North Carolina and you could talk. I mean, the buzz is already there. So like the quarterbacks always drive the draft, and they did this draft, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's Bryce Young, and there's CJ, and there's Anthony, and there they are right at the very top of the draft. And we're going to follow these guys and their careers, and not to mention, Will and all the other guys that got taken, Hendon Hooker, whatever. We're going to follow these guys because we love finding the next Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow wasn't that difficult to find. Let's be honest. But
Right.
But Brock Purdy, lit the league on fire. And if anybody thinks that what he did is a fluke, Mike, and we might have even been in Iowa State, Mike. I don't remember.
A couple times, Ames. Beautiful
Ames. When Brock, but we might have even seen Brock. And so even from our standpoint, I remember seeing Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech quite a bit.
Yep.
And so you kind of remember those days, and now you see Mahomes. Is he the best player in the league? Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
But we all remember back when. And so that's kind of the game. And literally, as soon as a team is 1-5, every bit of that fan base is looking to, if Arizona is 1-5 or worse this year, they're going to be like, okay, who's taking over for Kyler? Is it Caleb? Who's coming in? So, and then I was walking down the beach here, Mike, just a couple of weeks ago, and this guy says, "Hey, Baldy, what's going on?" And I didn't know by face, but it was Kalijah Kancey, and he's working out on the beach. He got drafted by Tampa. I immediately called Sap. I'm like, Sap, their baby Sap is down the beach here. Get with this kid and see, what you can teach him, because I think the kid's got everything it takes to be a really good player. I don't know if he's Aaron Donald or anything like that, but he's going to be a good player. So the stories, Mike, honestly, just go on and on and on. At every round, top of the draft, quarterbacks, and so here we are. It was a big buzz this year.
I'm curious. You played offensive line. You got to play it a lot longer than most people do, but your story is an interesting one. When guys like JC were evaluating guys out of high school, you would not have had, a ton of stars, right? I mean, because you kind of flew under the radar. You bounce around a little bit. You wind up at Duke. If I'm not mistaken, Steve Spurrier is your offensive coordinator at Duke.
Right.
I definitely want to hear about that. And then you go undrafted, and then you play a dozen years in the league. So it just goes to show you that the evaluation process, as much as it's come along even today, but guys still miss on. There's recruiting misses coming into college. We talk about that all the time on this podcast. And then there's misses in the draft, and there's guys that are 6th-round draft picks that become Pro Bowlers. Tell me about that experience, first of all. Tell me about your trek to the NFL and why you flew under the radar, for one, and then what was it like playing at Duke at that time?
All right, so I'm going to, JC can hear this too, because he's at 24/7. He's assigning stars to guys. The one thing, whether it's JC or anybody else, Mike, honestly, in this process, is the only thing that you're trying to find. I just saw Jalen Phillips yesterday. I mean, he's a 5-star talent, period. Just watching him, looking at him move. I mean, his movement is elite. In fact, Rick Spielman, former GM of the Vikings, said he had the greatest workout of any player who's ever given anybody. And that's, there's a lot, Hunter, Dalvin Cook. I mean, there's a million guys that come through Minnesota. But what you can't find and what's hard to evaluate is just how big is the heart for the game. That's what everybody wants to know and wants to find out. And there's a lot of different circumstances. Money can change things. You can go to a bad place. I mean, all that stuff is out there. But for me personally, I'm at Duke. I was a tight end. Steve Spurrier comes in. He changed our offense, become a passing offense. I became a pretty good pass protector when they moved me to offensive line. I tested pretty well, but I was still filling out. I was still growing, and that's happy. Sometimes you get caught in that growth spurt where I'm going from 230 to 260. In 1982, that was typical size, 265. So I'm in that process of getting there. But the good thing was going to Dallas. They thought so highly of me, Mike, with the Dallas Cowboys as a free agent that they sent the equipment manager to sign me. They didn't send a scout. They didn't send, Gil Brandt. They sent the equipment manager because they were trying to sign so many free agents. They didn't have enough personnel to sign them. And my brother had just gotten drafted by the New York Giants, and I thought, if that lazy stiff could get drafted in the 10th round, and I can't get drafted. Well, all right, I got some work cut out for me. But the good thing was Dallas signed 110 of us, and so it was the original reality TV, Mike. Like literally every day, players were like getting the knock on the door, bags were packed. The bus was picking them up, taking them home. And so, I was the only free agent that made it my year. But it was good. Like I was basically a blocking dummy against Randy White. So, either Randy White kicks your ass, and you put your tail between your legs, or you block him one day and you go out and you party like there's no tomorrow. Like you blocked Randy White, who was the predominant defensive tackle of football in 1982, and you go out and you have 8 shots to kill and go, man, if I could do it twice tomorrow, I'm on my way. And so it's a process. I just decided that you get weird things, Mike. Like I decided I'm going to wear the same thing every single day until they kick me out of here. I never even opened my suitcase. I wore the same clothes every day. Just maybe somebody would notice. Maybe I would just smell bad, whatever it was. So like I got into that camp at Thousand Oaks. I wasn't getting out, man. No way. Like they were going to drag me out of that place.
And obviously it worked out. JC's got the UNLV visor. I know you blocked for Randall Cunningham eventually in Philadelphia, but it all started in Dallas. We're huge Steve Spurrier guys on this podcast.
Yeah, sure.
Did you have any idea what you were dealing with and what he would turn into? Because at that point, he hadn't even been a head coach.
Well, he had gotten fired at Georgia Tech. Okay.
Right.
So he was out of a job. He literally walked on at Duke. He's from Bristol, Tennessee. Father was a preacher. I know you know the history of Steve. But like he literally was looking for a job. They gave him a whistle and a shirt. And he shows up. He's 36 years old. And he was like, I'll never forget this, Mike. In fact, I was actually talking to somebody at the Dolphins yesterday about Bob Matheson, the old, no-name defense, number 53. It was named for him, all that stuff. And Bob was on that staff with Steve. And we used to play pickup basketball in Cameron Indoor every day. It would like be me and Steve against Bob Matheson and this guy that played tight end for the Green Bay Packers. We played 2-on-2. And Steve, like literally, that was the sorest loser or the biggest competitor I've been around at that stage. Now,
and a hell of a basketball player in high school.
Great basketball player, Mike. I mean, really. But, golf, tennis, like his back hadn't gotten bad yet. And he was out there. Okay, he had the whistle, he had the visor. But he was like on the courts, basketball courts, tennis courts, taking money on the golf course. Like, he was like, well, if I'm going to be at Duke and they're going to give me this offensive coordinator job, I got my quarterback, Ben Bennett, who turned out to be a great player, and he's going to install his off. Well, to your point, though, what I saw from Steve, like, Clemson was running the veer. North Carolina's got 5 running backs that are all going to the NFL. Everybody's running the veer except Steve. So it gave us a competitive edge. And the stuff that he was coming up with, like literally the plays, like he would just be out there and practice and go, what if you just bounce the ball backwards, Ben, off the turf to the wide receiver? Everybody will think it's an incomplete pass, and it's really just a backward lateral. And then you throw the ball down, like those kind of things, like every day. Like he didn't even know how to talk to the defense. He didn't even know a defensive player's name on her team. He spent very little time with the offensive line. Just block them, God dang it, Baldy. Just block them up front. We'll get everything on. Give him a quarterback, some receivers, and a decent running back, and let him. He went to work, man. And to this day, though, to Steve's credit, all the success he's had, which is a lot, he still gives a lot of attention to Duke. I think still donates, him and his wife. Like they still come back for fundraisers. Like he's still very involved in the Duke community.
Yeah, he would be even when he was at Florida and South Carolina, he would always throw Duke in his top 25 just as an homage to, just as an homage to his time there. He because they gave him that opportunity.
His greatest win, Mike, was the first game of 1982. We went to Knoxville, Tennessee with Reggie White and Bill Bates and a whole bunch of others and beat Tennessee. And they were like, they might have been a top 10 team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know. I did not know that. I know everybody knows when he became the head coach there, the 89 ACC championship, which again, may never be done again in Duke football, with all due respect to your alma mater. So you get to play for 2 of the biggest innovators, for my money, in the history of the sport. Spurrier on the collegiate side and Tom Landry on the professional side. That's a hell of a knowledge base to
Yeah.
just kind of absorb that like a sponge.
So it was funny, Mike. Well, this year, Drew Pearson, our wide receiver in Dallas, now a Hall of Famer, he organized just a players only reunion in Dallas. And I went, and I hadn't seen a lot of these guys. Hadn't seen, like, I see Dorsett every once in a while. I see Everson Walls, but there's a lot of guys I hadn't seen. Hollywood Henderson, like, there's a lot of guys. A lot of guys showed up. We basically vetted Tom Landry because he literally Mondays. It didn't matter if we went to Seattle and beat the Seahawks 35-3. Monday we were in the film room, and literally he ran the projector and he went through every single play: offense, defense, special teams. And Randy White went to 8 straight Pro Bowls. Like his fingernails were gripping under the table on that play where he was too high, and Russ Grimm drove him off the ball and put him 5 yards down the field. He was just waiting to hear it. And that's how it was. Like, you never felt like you were good enough, but which was good because to him, regular season was good. Big wins against, Washington was good. Going into Philly was good, but it was about the postseason. And that was the measuring stick. He had this thing every quarter, every 4 games. We did a review and we had reasonable goals, which was what you needed to do on every metric to get to the playoffs. And then outstanding goals, what you needed to do to win a Super Bowl. And that's how we measured his team. And so I came in as a rookie the year after Dwight Clark caught the winning touchdown pass in the NFC Championship game in San Francisco. And Coach Landry decided my rookie year that his team had to get tougher. So he literally drilled us in the morning 3 hours, in the afternoon 3 hours. We conditioned after every practice. Like, he was just going to sharpen the knife as sharp as we could. Now, we ended up going on strike in 82. We did get back to an NFC Championship game, but we lost to Washington. That ended up winning the Super Bowl. It was Joe Gibbs' first Super Bowl that year, first Super Bowl win. But I mean, that was his approach.
Yeah, just the ultimate attention to detail and a savant on all sides of it: offense, defense, special teams. He was an innovator on everything that he did. I think there's a younger generation that doesn't know that because as time passes, you don't hear the name Tom Landry as much.
I mean, he was in Green Bay. He was in New York with Vince Lombardi. So he's the defensive coordinator. Vince Lombardi is the offensive coordinator. So to this day, Tom Landry, like, if you wanted to run to the right, it was power 49 Nero pinch because he was the defensive coordinator. He was looking at it from the opposite standpoint. So all the odd numbers went right. All the even numbers went left because he was trying to stop, Lombardi's sweep as a giant defensive coordinator.
Yeah. So and then you had and you guys did the up down where you'd all stand like nobody else did.
Well, his thing, he was a defense coordinator. So he thought, it was hard if we all did a shift. And while we all stood up, the defense took their eyes off what was going on in the backfield for just a second.
Right.
Just a second where you had to reset the eyes. Just pretty innovative to me.
Pretty innovative stuff. We use the term freak for a lot of modern day quarterbacks, and whether it's Lamar Jackson, even Josh Allen. For years it was Mike Vick. You blocked for one of maybe the original freak quarterback in Randall Cunningham. We mentioned that name minutes ago. What was that like, and just how talented was he?
He was unbelievable, Mike. Like, he could punt the ball 70 yards. I mean, he could throw it 80 yards without, just a flick. And when I was with him in Philly, he was single. He was into his stats. He wasn't well coached. Buddy Ryan threw him in there and threw him out there in front of Ron Jaworski. But Randall matured, like you hope a lot of guys do. He ended up getting married. He's still married, got a beautiful wife. And then he ended up leaving, and he went to Minnesota with Brian Billick. Was the offensive player of the year. He went to Baltimore with Billick. Like, when Billick got a hold of him, he coached him, and he became an elite player. When I played with him, he was just an elite athlete, and he could jump over people. The highlights are ridiculous. In fact, I saw Jalen Hurts last year. We were working out together, and all he wanted to do was ask me about Randall. He's kind of a historian of the game now, and what he was like. I mean, Randall would walk in the huddle in the 2-minute drill. He couldn't understand the signal from the sideline. And he would just tell, Freddie Barnett and Calvin Williams, like, just do this, like, just go down the field. Just, I'll get it to you. And I'm looking at the center, Dave Alexander. I'm like, I'm the right tackle on the play. I'm like, what do I do? He goes, just block right. You'll be fine. Fine. Randall's bringing us back in a 2-minute drill. Like it was kind of street ball.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was nothing he couldn't do.
Right. It's almost, there's a little bit of what if kind of assigned to his career.
Well, in
right?
1993, Mike, we started off 4-0. And we were playing the Jets in the 4th game of the year. And he tore his ACL or broke his leg, one of the two. And our season kind of went down the hill. But like we were built for a Super Bowl team that year. I mean, Keith Byers was a tailback, and we had elite tight ends, and our offensive line was good. Our defense was the best in the league. We were putting quarterbacks in a body bag every Sunday.
I remember.
I mean, it was ridiculous what we had on that side of the ball.
Yeah.
And then Randall went down, and we really didn't have an answer.
And then, of course, he had the terrific year in Minnesota. They miss a field goal, and Atlanta winds up going to the Super Bowl instead. I know we're on limited time. Tell everybody, how did Baldy's breakdowns come about, and tell folks that haven't already kind of subscribed to that how they do it.
So I used to do this show for the NFL Network in LA, Mike, on Mondays after I get done doing a college game on Saturday, NFL game on Sunday. I'd fly into LA. We did a show called The Aftermath. It was Daniel Jeremiah was on the show, Mike Silver, myself, Rhett Lewis. It was fun. Steve Weiss. It was really good. We really break down. But in order to really kind of get ahead of the show, which started at noon or like noon in LA, I'd get in the film room like at 4 a.m. and I just watch as much as I could. And so Daniel Jeremiah, who was living like in Temecula, to beat the traffic, he would get there at 4. So we were in there together, and he was there kind of really looking ahead, looking at draft picks and stuff more than Sunday's games at that time. But we would start like, just, man, look at that. Like, look at that. Like, look at this technique or this, we were just like pointing things out. Like he was doing it as a scout. I was doing it as an analyst, whatever. And we started posting a few things. We weren't really supposed to, but we started doing it. And it connected immediately, Mike. Like it really connected. And then my contract was up, but they really didn't want to sign me to another contract or whatever. And I just said, okay, but this is what I'm doing. And I'm just telling you, like, this is the future. Like, and when they're like, what are you going to call this? I'm like, I'm going to call it Baldy's Breakdowns. And they're like, yeah, we don't really like the name. I said, I like it. Let's just see what happens. So we gave it a year, and it blew up. And now, every player around the league is watching. But, the good thing is coaches at the high school level are watching for techniques. High school kids are watching to learn the game. Players are coming after me to evaluate their tape. It's kind of, we're all trying to grow the game like the NBA is growing it like overseas. And so it's helping over there. So I think and I just felt ultimately, Mike, I thought there was a big void between what I said with you on Sunday in the booth and how much time we had to describe a play and what really happened on the play. And you really had to slow it down, to break it down, to learn what happened.
And for those that don't know, I mean, I've seen you record these things on airplanes, hotels. You and I did one of the Chiefs games late this year. We're done with the game. You're recording it in the press box. I mean, you can do it anywhere. You're like a one-man crew, and you always, like, the light bulb goes on. I got a breakdown. Let's do it now, which is the beauty of the technology we have today. You're not at the mercy of a studio set and the schedule of such. So it's fantastic. One final question. I know we got to let you run. I saw Drake May for the spring game for North Carolina. I know you were always looking ahead. Caleb Williams of Southern Cal right now. Most people have him number 1, May 2. Those are 2 guys you're looking at? Maybe Penix at Washington.
I saw them both, Mike, when they were like 16. I did a lot of work with Richmond Flowers with the Quarterback Collective. And there was a lot of coaches that were involved. Kyle Shanahan is involved. Sean McVay is involved. So anyways, I saw Caleb when he was 16 or 17, kid out of Baltimore area. And I sat down, and what I would do is at these quarterback camps, I'd sit down in the film room with some of these guys, and we'd just throw on some Mahomes or throwing some tape, Aaron Rodgers, whatever, let them kind of tell me what they see. And I remember when Caleb was 17, and I told these guys, I'm like, he was a bigger he was a bigger, stronger Russell Wilson when he was 17. Like I said, if he went to the combine right now, the way that he throws the ball, just the way he threw it, forget his movement or how he sees the field and what Lincoln's done with them. I thought, like, you could have put him in the combine. He could compete with anybody that was in the draft this year. And that's when he was in high school. And then you watch what he did at OU and now. And Drake's not far off. I love Mac Brown. We all love Mac Brown. He's got a real adult in the room kind of guiding him here. I feel good. Now he's got to go do it. And it could be a 1A, 1B thing like it was almost this year. But I kind of just watching what Caleb did this year. Kind of hard. I feel like it's Caleb and everybody else right now.
Yeah, I think right now he's got the inside track to the number 1 pick, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, those are 2 franchise guys. Quite frankly, I think those 2 might project higher than most of the guys that went in the first round this past draft.
Oh, no question. If Caleb was in this draft, I don't think we'd have been talking about Bryce the way we did. And not knocking Bryce. We're just looking at bigger, stronger, like, I don't know, better prospect at this point.
Yeah, and a guy that's produced, unlike an Anthony Richardson. I mean, he's a physical freak, but we just don't know yet. We don't know what we don't know. So that's going to be interesting. Here's what we do know. Baldy's Breakdowns, NFL Network, Compass Radio. Look forward to working with you soon in the booth, and look forward to watching all the work that you do. Really appreciate you carving out the time. We could talk ball with you for like hours, and maybe next time we'll do so. But keep up the great work, and look forward to seeing you down the road.
You got it, Mike. You bet. Anytime, buddy. Come on,
appreciate it.
When you come back down in June.
Oh, heck yeah! Save some of the sharks for me, okay?
All right. All right.
All right. Thanks again to Brian Baldinger for joining us. Again, he's a wealth of knowledge on both the collegiate side and the pro side. And for those of us that love the two, I always like to say that they're interlinked now in so many ways. And what college football is trying to do, JC, we've talked about this a bunch. They want what the NFL wants. They want the relevance, the talking points, the coverage 12 months out of the year. And they're kind of getting it because the NFL has the draft. College football has spring football. I mean, I'm turning on the TV last night and I see a replay of, I hear my voice in the background. I'm like, that's kind of weird. And it's a replay of the LSU spring game that we did back in April. They're going to replay those till September, and you'd be amazed how many people still watch the spring game replays. The NFL has OTAs. Spring football has what we just had in Destin, what we just had in Sanibel, what we just had in, I don't know, where does the Big 12 do theirs? I'm not sure. But all these, what's that?
Big 12 and Pac-12 were both in Phoenix. In same
Phoenix, that's right. How awkward is that? Like, hey, welcome to Phoenix. Hey, hope you don't mind sharing the same. By the way, you stop trying to poach our programs and lead to our ultimate demise. But so those are talking points. I mean, Paul Feinbaum had a week's worth of incredible content because you've got all the debate about whether or not the SEC would go to 8 or 9, which leads me to subject number one, and that is, for all the talk about the SEC going to a 9-game slate, and clearly, if you just read between the lines, that's what the SEC wants in a lot of ways, but it's not a dictatorship. The programs have to kind of be in sync on that, and clearly there was some resistance. And so here we've got 2 more years of 8. I'm still convinced it's going to go to 9. I'm still convinced that 3-6 model is the way to do it, but it's going to be put on hold. What was your take from everything that went down in Destin?
I'm worried. I'm worried. I'm concerned when this league, with regards to football scheduling, just does something scattershot and temporary. It tends to not do as good of a job as it maybe would do if it were a master plan. And people can argue that perhaps the rotating situation once Missouri and A&M came in was not ideal and not a good job, because you have situations like A&M and Georgia have never played in College Station and all that good stuff. But So the concern is, in my understanding as what Sankey said afterward is 2024 is really the only season they're guaranteed to be at 8. And they're going to protect all these rivalries. So, so then what do you do in 2025? Well, you're either going to a 3-6 model, or you're going to have like one year where we have Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia, Texas A&M, Texas, Arkansas, all those games. And then you're going to have another year where those games aren't played because the format is a 1-7. So, which I think is kind of wild in a lot of ways, but I'm just curious as to, because they're not only staying at 8, but they're the stated, what the statement said, we're going to protect all of our rivals. So, what do you do? I mean, so if you stay at 8 in 2025, do you just kind of restart it? I mean, what happens to some of these games that are coming up on the rotation, these teams that haven't played, that kind of thing? I would have preferred them to say, okay, we're going to go with 8 for 2 seasons and let that cycle kind of play out, or even 4, and then revisit it, because I don't think you could just look at like, okay, 12-team playoff. Are they going to give the 3-loss teams any more credit? All that good stuff. I don't think you could judge that based on just one season. And that's part of it too. Now, look, is that was that the horse that's the cart's attached to? No, that's definitely TV money. And I think with ESPN now, it's a bad time to ask them for more money, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They call it, I mean, you even heard people complain about Pat McAfee getting a big contract from them,
Right.
And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of that comes from an ignorance about how much money really is at stake. And when you're talking about cutting X number of jobs and you're saving X, that's really a drop in the bucket, to go spend Y. And, but it's PR, and Disney is a very PR conscious company. And it's just, when Bob Iger is on the record as saying, bottom line with ESPN, we have to be a little more judicious with what we're paying out for rights. And that's the head mouse, then I think I just don't think the timing was there to cough up more money for the SEC for an extra game starting that quickly. Now that doesn't mean that can't change in 12 months, because I think ESPN will get back on its feet and everybody will be fine, but I think it's just the timing wasn't there for that money. And then if the money's not there, that changes the equation for a lot of teams, not just from the standpoint of, like the student athlete safety thing is an overblown situation. I mean, the SEC versus, a game is a game is a game, man.
Silliness.
Come on.
Yeah.
But
that's when you always know the real truth is being buried, when they start bringing up player safety.
Alabama went through the 13 games and played all SEC opponents and Ohio State, and they made it through just fine. I mean, it wasn't everybody did that one year.
Didn't see a rash of injuries that year.
So, look, people bring that up. That's one thing, but really the playoff situation is something to look out for, and the money is. And if you're not going to give them the extra money, then what people don't realize either, and I wish, this drives me crazy about fans sometimes. And I get this locally and nationally. Why'd we schedule this? And then they blame everybody that's currently in charge. Why is so-and-so coach scheduling this opener? They don't understand. This happened 10 years ago. This game was scheduled 10 years ago. And so when you're talking about adding another SEC game, and we've gone through a period of time where many big time, like every SEC program except Kentucky has scheduled up and scheduled challenging non-conference games, and they've scheduled it, pretty far in advance. And so you're talking about getting out a mess, untangling all these contracts. What games are you going to cancel? That are you doing your fans justice? In other words, like if you're Georgia and you cancel the Clemson game in a couple of years ago, because Kentucky or Vanderbilt or Arkansas or somebody that your fans are not going to get up for as much to play rotates on the schedule. Is that really, so do you drop the Ball State game? I mean, and there's like a massive amount of games that are going to have to be like rescheduled, canceled, contracts, things like that. So if the money's not there, why would you take the expense of breaking these contracts? Because you're going to have to pay to get out of some of them. And go through all that mess right now for no financial benefit, no benefit to the bottom line. So, especially, when you have Alabama and some other schools that kind of reverse course and said, we'd rather stay at 8 right now and all that good stuff. So, my only gripe with it is I wish they would have maybe said, okay, we're going to do this 2 years instead of just 1, because a lot of times when things are hodgepodge or just temporary, you're not gonna make everybody happy anyway, Mike. But there's a lot of senses of unfairness at the various schools when that happens. So we'll see what happens. But that was the only gripe. I have no problems with the SEC staying at 8 games. One thing I don't buy is this narrative that, they're scared. Fear.
No, I don't think they're scared. I think there's validity to everything you just said as kind of the primary causes. I do think, well, I think we pretty much know that there are some programs, and, their opinion starts with who? Starts with the coach, gets to the AD, eventually gets to the president. And there are some there that, what I always talk about on this podcast when it comes to coaches, path of least resistance. There are some coaches who think about full survival mode. Is 9 games going to help me keep my job longer? And the answer in many cases is no. And so if that's the case, why are we fighting to go to 9? I'm not going to benefit any more as a coach financially if we go to 9. So what is the benefit for me? And then you have coaches like Nick Saban being very vocal about he didn't like the permanent 3 opponents that were initially thrown out there. So that throws another monkey wrench into things. So in other words, I don't think it's just as simple as, well, they don't want to go to 9 because there's not more money on the table. I think there clearly were some people that are kind of in the trenches, so to speak, that said, that looked in the mirror and said, 8's working okay for me. Do we really want to go to 9? What's the net gain for, like, big picture? If you're running the league and you're in that office in Birmingham, the advantages are obvious. If you're a fan, the advantage is obvious. Although I always point out, a fan wants an extra difficult game until they lose it. And then it's like, why do we want this? A fan always give me 10 conference. Let's do all conference games. Okay, what if you're 4-8 then? Well, no, I don't want that. Okay, well then you don't want all conference games. Like that COVID year, there was a lot of like, this is refreshing. It's refreshing until you have a losing record and you're not in a bowl game, or you're a premier program and you're not in a playoff. But it's like, okay, maybe it's not so refreshing anymore. So I think there's a little bit of that too, mixed in the stew. But I do think we are going to get to 9. You're just going to have to wait a couple more years, period. You just got to wait a couple more years, and they're going to have to figure out exactly what schedule model. I've always thought the simple thing about the permanent opponent controversy is you can at least rotate a couple of those. Like you could do 3 permanents for a 4-year period, and then you change 2 of them 4 years later. I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't seem that difficult. You're never going to please everybody. There's always going to be whining and moaning, but I don't think it's that much of an obstacle to clear to get us to a 9-game slate. So that was the biggest thing. You might argue it was the only thing that came out of the meetings. I mean, these are not like major headline generating meetings, right? It's more like a State of the Union. And the only other thing that came out of there, and of course, as we speak now, a week later, the SEC is in Washington, D.C. I say the SEC. Certain people from the SEC, administrators, athletic directors, are in the fine city of Washington, D.C., in regards to the future of NIL legislation in college sports. Again, I don't know what's going to come out of that, but I will say this. If the people within the most prominent and powerful conference in the land can't move the needle, then the needle's not going to be moved anytime soon. So when it's all said and done, if this is a big nothing burger, then good luck trying to clean up the mess that is NIL with no guardrails. What other power brokers are going to actually get some action done here? So that's what's happening as we speak. I don't know if is that on like C-SPAN 5. I don't know if you can watch that or what, but that's the other story that's going on post Destin.
Yeah, and some of these bills, man, they're not. It's just like everything else in DC. It's extreme one way or the other. I'm not a big fan, quite frankly, of the Lindsey Graham style bill where all the government's doing is basically creating another layer of bureaucracy to kind of manage college sports and enforce the rules. I'm like, well, who's gonna? I mean, that's politics, right? That's opening yourself up for an organization that's going to be fundamentally even more political than the NCAA. And so you talk about conspiracies and things like that. In other words, those folks in Washington, they really don't give a crap about anything but getting reelected. What's going to happen when you have somebody in charge of an infractions case or abusing an NIL case, and they're trying to kind of get back in the political game and run for a statewide office or something in a certain state, and that school's the one involved. And I'm not a big fan of that. And then at the same time, I rarely disagree with Nick Saban, Mike, when he's talking about big picture, but I don't think you can go to unions, unionize and all that with college, make them employees, because they're fundamentally not employees. They're kind of like teaching assistants, and I guess those are classified as employees, but they're also students. I'd rather just call it what it is. NIL is television. Television is NIL. Give them a cut of the television money. I mean, I would just rather negotiate that as a stipend or an add-on, and then strictly enforce guys. And that's one thing where a clearinghouse may work is, you shouldn't be able to have to pay, or you shouldn't be able to pay $65,000 for a tweet unless you're going to get that value, unless that student athlete has a massive following. You're talking Instagram influencer level. It kind of like the gymnast at LSU, the female gymnast at LSU. I mean, you could maybe pay her for that. Yeah. But
you got
that's kind of the
twins.
Yeah, the clearinghouse kind of deal. That's what that's going to do. But I think it's still very, very tricky as far as what how to regulate it. And I'm afraid, Mike, if Congress doesn't step in and do something, I think we're going to be looking at, okay, here are the 48 top programs with the most value. This side's the Big Ten, this side's the SEC. They're going to collaboratively work on broadcast rights and money, and football separating from the NCAA, and they're making their own rules with salary caps and things, and they will be employees and things meant to have a more competitive balance, or thing like the NFL. I don't know that that's great for college football. The NFL is set up to where teams rise and fall. I mean, you do have situations like the Patriots, you have the Chiefs that have been on a run for a while. You have haves and have nots in the NFL, but man, we're sitting there.
The draft is equal. The draft and the salary cap are the equalizer in the NFL.
Yeah, and you sit there and you go,
we're not going to have either one in college football.
Jaguars are one, at the end and now they're in the playoffs. Yeah, the draft, and that's interesting because I don't ever, college will never go to a draft. You're still going to have the top programs attracting the top players.
Yeah, the rich are just going to get richer.
those
seeing that now.
decisions, though, are not going to be made if they break off and say, okay, we're capping this, and this is how much they're going to make, and all this good stuff. Those decisions are going to go back to being made like they used to be made, instead of being made about money. In other words, you won't have one school that has all this money for NIL and then another school that doesn't, and then it's a bidding war. I think you'll have, if it's capped, you'll say, okay, well now it's back to being even. You have a puncher's chance, but I don't know. It's Congress is so. I mean,
there's one factor that everything you said, I hear this a lot. There's one factor that no one's ever talks about, and I'm just wondering why. Maybe I'm missing something, because I can't be the only person on the planet that thinks this way. So maybe I'm just flat out wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong. If you make them employees and you're setting it up as such, tell me how and why these athletic departments would not have to pay taxes. Because they don't pay taxes now. So if your athletic department brings in $85 million a year, you don't pay a red cent in taxes because of the university status, right?
Well,
so if you're declaring it a business and the athletes' employees, how do you get around paying taxes at that point?
I think you'll have to pay. They'll definitely have to pay payroll taxes, right?
Right.
In other words,
FICA,
FICA, matching contributions and stuff. Now, income tax would be different, because you do have 501c3s, like nonprofits, that do employ people. I mean, they have directors. Some of them.
But this wouldn't be declared a nonprofit.
Well, it already is, though.
Well, it is now, because you don't have employees.
Yeah,
but if you change the model, I don't. Is the government going to say, okay, you're a nonprofit, when everybody knows the insane TV dollars coming in, and everybody knows they're now salaried employees?
I think that's part of what they're looking for too, Mike, is some protection with antitrust and things like that. But they already pay coaches, and they already pay administrators and equipment managers and SIDs and folks like that. Some of those guys are independent contractors, but they're also employees. But then again, those guys also work within the greater university. And I think this too, if you carve football out, right? Take football out of the NCAA. I think what you're admitting there is this is not really a collegiate sport. It's more like it's its own thing. It acts more like a fundraiser. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you. And then there's Title IX that you're going to have to worry about. I mean, it's deeper than just pay or not. Yeah,
right. But this is the brilliance of NIL. It circumvents Title IX. Title IX, when Title IX really started, I just had a baseball regional, and Oregon was the team that defeated Vanderbilt and won it. And this story. Oregon, now a good baseball program it's 2 wins away from Omaha. They had to get rid of baseball in the early 80s. And, it just kind of, there's like this the pink elephant's missing in the story. Well, they got rid of baseball along with 3 other varsity sports as a money saving gesture, what have you. What you don't see in that story is it's because of Title IX. I'm not saying Title IX is a bad thing. It's not a hot take on anti-Title IX or anything else. But back then, the primary school sports that got cut, if you were in the Midwest, you just got rid of your wrestling team, which is huge in that part. Like states like Iowa, wrestling was a terrific sport that was actually supported fairly well by a lot of schools and their fans. And baseball, a lot of school, even Iowa State cut baseball, Big 12 program. And then you had you pay. I mean, we've talked about this before. Some of the best women's basketball programs in the country are programs that lose $5.5 million, $4 million, $3 million, and they're going to Final Fours. So you don't do these things because of the economics of it. You do it because it is a federal law. And when it really came to debate, what a lot of the athletic departments were saying, okay, we're all for it. Like, women's basketball should be on the same charter planes as the men. They should be staying at the same quality Marriott hotel, and you don't stick them in a Best Western because the women's team doesn't make as much money. Softball gets what baseball gets. But what a lot of the ADs were fighting for is like, okay, look. Let's pump the brakes here. We're all about that. But don't count football 85, the 85 scholarships, because there's no female equivalent to football. And Title IX said, too bad. And so you have more women's scholarships at virtually every school. Like, there's 2 more women's scholarships in women's basketball than there is men's basketball. Why? They still play 5-on-5. There's more scholarships in softball than there is in baseball. Why? You've got the same pitcher that can throw. You don't need, 12 pitchers because you're not throwing overhand, you're throwing underhand. But Title IX kept just staying strong and saying, no, this is what we believe in, and this is the way it's going to be. And finally, the other side capitulated and said, you know what? This is not a fight that we want to get into, and it held strong. Why do I say all that? Because if you think that you're going to label football this special classification where you're paying them as employees and you're giving them all this money in that realm, but you're not going to pay women's volleyball, that's going to be a major lawsuit within months. Lawyers are licking their chops as we speak to do that. The beauty of NIL is it's the same rules for everybody, right? I mean, you just mentioned Olivia Dunn. She's making more money than a hell of a lot of football and basketball players are. NIL is there's no guardrails, there's no cap, there's no anything. So you can make the case that the women's basketball player can make more money or just as much money as the starting quarterback of a team. And believe it or not, in some cases, they are making more. So that's why NIL, nobody wants to talk about this stuff, but if you really dig deep and think about it the way they think about it, this is a thing. So when I hear things like salaried employees and payroll, and just don't ever think you're going to get around Title IX that easily. That is, if you get to that point, you are not going to just pay the revenue generating sports X amount of money and then pay the women's sports a fraction of that without major lawsuits. And I just don't know if they have the appetite to go forward with that right now.
You're right. It's an interesting deal, and it's one of the things that I get frustrated about Title IX. I mean, to me, it's not a violation of people's civil rights if there's one sport that's, there's no equivalency with women's sports. Now, look, women have played college football before. I mean, Vanderbilt had a female kicker a few years back. Necessary Roughness. Oh, sorry, that's a movie.
Kathy Ireland.
Kathy Ireland. But no,
Kathy
seriously,
came through.
I mean, I guess you could say it's co-ed, but nobody's going to buy that. I mean, that it's co-ed. I mean, I don't know. It's hard because I just, what women's sport will take up 85 scholarships? And then
none.
The Title IXers, your Nancy Armors and people like that of the world that are out there, the hardcore Title IX people, they actually gripe about stuff like that. Like, oh, well, they're giving too many scholarships here. Well, what are you supposed to do? You got to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 85. I mean, why is that a bad thing? I mean, it's supposed to be about opportunity. And so that's even like what some of your hardcore, Title IX people, they don't even like that when you have 2 more basketball scholarships for women than men. It's sometimes I wonder what these people really want, but it's one of those things where I just think football is so unique. And here's the reality too. You mentioned something interesting. The Marriott brand, the private jet, all that, who pays, where that money comes from? Football.
Yeah, football pays the bills for
Pays
every
the bills,
football and
man.
men's basketball pays every bill. There are a few schools where baseball actually makes money as
Yeah,
well. Everything else is in the red
badly.
with almost 99%, almost everything else. You may think that your particular school is really good at this sport and that surely it makes money. It doesn't. It doesn't. When you add up all the travel costs, when you add up all the salaries of coaches, which now non-revenue generating sports, you've got coaches making millions upon millions of dollars because that's what the market plays. Because basically, you're in a way you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that's fine. Like that's where we are. If the fans don't care, if you're really good in one of those sports, what we've learned is fans that could care less about a particular sport, if their school's really good at it, all of a sudden, man, they're all in. They all of a sudden, because it's still got that school logo on it. It's still got those school colors on the uniforms, and now they're on national TV. Like it's no longer just two or three sports that are getting great network coverage. Other sports are getting terrific network coverage, and women's basketball's contract is up. That used to be just kind of lumped in with all the others. NCAA championships, there really wasn't much of a rights fee involved. That might change after this last tournament and the fascination with Caitlin Clark, and it's the right time to kind of cash in if you can.
A lot of women's basketball coaches have been talking about that too, Mike, like that they were kind of lumped in with baseball, softball, whatever. And given the ratings and the popularity and all that of the sport, you probably justify them having their own TV deal. It's probably not gonna fetch the dollars that bad men's basketball or football does, but what it will do,
No.
it will help some of those good or better programs and all programs from not operating so much in the red. I mean, instead of
Yeah.
losing 5 million a year, you may only lose 2 or 1. And
Mm-hmm.
it could kind of be a little bit more self-sustained. So of course, I think during a time period where we're asking the UCLA women's basketball team to fly to West Lafayette, Indiana, and play a Tuesday night game and then fly back, I think it's probably justified. I think it's probably justified for a lot of different things. But yeah, you're right. That sport right now is pretty hot, and it's a good time, I think, for this contract to be up.
No doubt. All right, I know we went off on a tangent there, but it is all kind of tied in uh, with the main item that's being discussed in DC now. Before we get to Five and Dimer, is there any other things that have been happening here that have caught your eye? I mean, obviously, no practice going on. Things are rather quiet in the portal now, and everything. So, once we figured out it was an 8-game slate, the rumors of the Big 12 poaching the pack. I'm almost getting tired of talking about this because it's just going on and on and on, and nothing's actually happening. But I'm convinced there's a lot of discussions that are happening that we don't know about. And I'm also convinced, I have no inside information on this. Let me just say that for the record. I'm convinced that bare minimum, Colorado is going to be in the Big 12. And I don't think they're going to be alone when the dust settles. But that's the other major. We're just sitting on Mount St. Helens in 1980, and we're waiting for this sucker to erupt. And people are like, "Well, it hadn't erupted. Maybe we can walk toward the mountain. Maybe take a few. How about a selfie?" And then hot lava is going to
Bang.
spew everywhere, and there's going to be a lot of people not happy about it. But nothing has officially happened. Just a whole lot of rumors and stories with nothing behind it.
Yeah, look, I think unless the Pac-12 just lands against it, sometimes these TV deals come up a little better than what the projection is. Sometimes they're worse. I mean, unless they come up with something, I just the Big 12 right now it seems to be that they're kind of fighting tooth and nail to be the number 3 league, right? There's nothing wrong with being number 3. And it's a big conference now that will stretch into three time zones if they add back Colorado and Arizona, and then I think part of the year Arizona is in Pacific time too, so you can I think it goes back and forth. So look, I think it makes all the sense in the world for what they call the corner schools to join. You already have a presence if you're the Big 12 in the Rocky Mountains with BYU. You had it with Colorado for years. So Utah is a natural fit. Obviously, I don't think Utah wants to go because I think Utah being in the Pac-12 has kind of given them a leg up on BYU through the years. Look at the success they've had. But I mean, if everybody else is going there, they're not going to turn down the money. Arizona and Arizona State for years have been, Arizona basketball notwithstanding, sort of red-headed stepchildren in that league. They were not originally in the Pac-12. They were in the WAC for a long time and then joined. And I think, whereas as a state, Arizona does kind of have a lot in common with California and Nevada and all that. They also have a lot in common with Texas going east. I mean, they're more of the culture there is not necessarily California light. So I think that I think they would benefit, quite frankly. So I'm very curious to see. Now, one thing that's baffling to me about the Big 12 is this talk that UConn and Gonzaga are going to join. And I'm like, well, I know Gonzaga doesn't have football. So obviously, they're going to, I mean, I think it'd be funny if they started a football program, but they don't have football. And I'm like, well, how do they sort of fit other than they're going to play a bunch of really good basketball games? And then UConn just got out. I mean, they finally just made their fans happy a few years back and got out of the American because they had to travel all over. Are they really going to go back to a situation that's similar to that where, now that they're back in the Big East? I don't know. Those seem a little more far-fetched to me than, having the corner schools join or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reports have been Colorado and Arizona. So I'm sort of curious because, how these things go within a state, they're Arizona and Arizona State are pretty much bitter rivals, but most of the time, Oklahoma, the states of Oklahoma and Texas notwithstanding, most of the time when there's a move, from conference to conference, they kind of go as a pair. So I'm curious to see, if Colorado and Arizona are the first to the party, Arizona State's probably not too far behind, and Utah probably isn't either. So that's kind of what's interesting to me is you would think Arizona would probably be a little more apt to try to want the Pac-12 to be together. They seem to be the ones kind of at the forefront. And you would think Arizona State may just be like, look, we've been a sleeping giant in this league for years and years and years, and the giant's never awoken. Let's gotta go see what we can do in greener pastures, So that's the state of Arizona is sort of a pretty interesting dynamic to me as far as all this goes too.
Yeah, I think the schools you mentioned, they fall into two different categories. One is we'd rather be in the Big 12, period. The Big 12 is clearly moving places. It's got stability with a TV contract, and the future just seems bright there. And so we would rather be there. And then the other category is, well, we're pretty happy in the Pac, but the Pac could be headed to extinction. We don't want to be DiCaprio on that little sliver of ice where Rose is like, no, I'm good. You just doggy paddle for the next 4 hours and see how you feel. And then you drowned, and I know JC, you wept like a baby at the end of Titanic when that happened. So you don't want to be part of that. You don't want to be part of that scene where you're holding on to that sliver of ice and everybody else is gone and the rescue boats they've already left, man. They called it a day. So I think both categories are in play. Not everybody who's looking to leave the Pac is necessarily unhappy in the Pac, but you don't know what the heck is going on. Like nothing has moved the needle. If your main TV carriers are Amazon Prime and Netflix, and you're just like a streaming even in today's climate where so much is moving that way, you want to be affiliated with a network at some point, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of takers there. They're not getting many offers.
This is interesting to me too, because I would have thought that ESPN would have been, because they lost the Big Ten, would have wanted that inventory. Now
They would love. Here's what I think. Again, I always have
Yeah.
to classify this.
Yeah,
I don't have
classified.
inside information, right? Okay. Yes, I am an employee, but I'm that's way above my pay grade. There's no question it would make sense, and it'd be a great thing to have that late night window, so you can tune in ESPN at 9 in the morning for game day. And for those of us who are night owls, pack after dark, those windows are open. So now you got 9 a.m. to midnight plus every Saturday. That's a valuable thing. But you don't even know who's going to be in the league. You don't. So like it's the chicken or the egg. The Pac needs a TV contract in order to keep teams in the league. The TV contract's not going to give you a whole lot of money unless they know who's going to stay and who's going to go. And so it's just complete chaos right now, and there's no stability. This is where you say what you will about the ACC contract, that grants and rights. That's what kept that stable. That's why those teams are still there, even if they want to play footsies under the table with other conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten, because they can't go. They are locked in. Well, the Pac has no such deal, none, and seems, relatively speaking, fairly easy for them to bolt now. And so that's why I think like something is going to happen here in the near future. All right, time for what is becoming an award-winning segment. Where is it? Cinephile? Is that what they call those people that just love movies?
Cinephile. Yeah, I think so.
I think that's an actual term. Anyway, the Five and Dimer segment, it goes like this: what movies do you can't help yourself when it's on, you watch? And I just randomly pick three. This is not the world according to Mike. I pick some movies that I don't particularly even like, but I stumble upon these three every now and then. I'm like, that could be a potential Five and Dimer for the segment. So here's the triple play I've come up with today: Boys in the Hood, Primal Fear, Any Given Sunday. I'll start with Boys in the Hood. JC, you have the floor. Fiver, Dimer, or neither?
Dimer plus.
Yeah.
Man, what a great movie. Lawrence Fishburne, Ice Cube. I mean, that's it has a football recruiting element to it.
Yes, Ricky, 5-star running back.
Man, I mean,
let's get that SAT score, and he's going to be good to go.
What a great flick, man. Nobody cares about what's going on in the hood.
Either they don't know, don't show, or don't care.
What a daggone movie. Yeah, double or whatever the above. Maybe
this is Ben
quite,
Franklin for me. This is Ben Franklin.
Yeah, it may not be quite a Ben Franklin because I haven't watched it in a while, but it used to be whenever it's on, I'll watch it. So
it's
probably close to a Franklin.
Yeah, it's on BET, and I think BET has a separate movie channel. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, when I'm scrolling through the dial, if I see it, that's in the rotation, right? So when the game's going to commercial, back to Boys in the Hood. Commercial, Doughboy. Commercial, Ricky. And I still, Ferris, I'll never forgive you for what all the strife and heartache you caused that family, because you always had to show how hard you were. This movie came out when I was in high school, and I remember there was a buzz to it. And so I didn't know the story about John Singleton, which we'll get to in just a second. I didn't see it until I was in college. And when I saw it, a buddy of mine had it on VHS.
Wow.
When VHS was still a thing. And I said, "Hey, can I borrow that?" He's like, yeah, here, just take it. I would come home from class, and if I had nothing going on, I would just pop in that movie. And it would be like background noise, but I'd also watch. And I'm one of those weird people, like sometimes I'm most productive when the TV is on. So I could study for a final and have Boys in the Hood on in the background and multitask. I still operate that way. It drives people crazy. They don't understand it. I don't understand it, but it is what it is. That's how my brain works. I'm not a big fan of complete silence. This is why you won't catch me at a library anytime soon. I've worn out the heck out of this movie. And here's the thing. It still works today. Like the story, the acting, everything about it still holds true today. And so the film stands up, 30 years later, give or take. John Singleton, who passed away, he did other movies, but this was clearly his Godfather. And he did it. He came up with the idea when he was a film student at Southern Cal. And then, like somehow got the funding, goes to Ice Cube and asks him if he would be a part of it when Ice Cube hadn't been in Friday or anything yet. And Fishburne was a biggest name actor, I guess, at that point, but he hadn't really exploded yet. And then you had
Cuba Gooding
Jr., who wound up winning an Oscar, and Jerry Maguire, another movie we need to put on this list. But for the most part, and Ricky was Morse Chestnut. I mean, there was a lot of like unknown actors that went on to bigger and better. Think Regina Davis, is it?
Mm-hmm.
She's in this movie, but the story is so friggin' good, and it's just so authentic. Like there's movies that try to do this type of storyline, and you feel like you're being preached to, and it's kind of like the director is basically inserting his own diatribe in the movie, but he's not showing all sides of it. I don't get that sense. Like everything about this was so real, it's so authentic, and it's well acted. And yes, it's disturbing. This is not a feel good movie, but not every movie that I like to rewatch is a feel. I mean, The Godfather isn't a feel good movie. Casino, a guy's got his head in a vice. It's not a feel good movie, but it is really, really. And they've tried to other people have tried to make movies similar to this, and I think a lot of them fall flat. But Boys in the Hood is just a classic, and there was nothing like it when it came out. Nothing. So yeah, this for me is a absolute. Like I said, it's a Ben Franklin. It's a Ben Franklin for me, and it's still when it's on, I'm like, damn, this is good. This is really, really good. Primal Fear. Now, this was filmed in Chicago. You've been to a lot of these spots, right? What's Primal Fear for you?
Yes, it's
Richard
between
Gere.
Lauren Richard Gere, Ed Norton.
Ed Norton, yeah. This is when Ed Norton was the ultimate badass.
Well, yeah, we started finding out at this point he had some acting chops. That's a classic Chicago movie too. Caps, Chicago Caps, beef sandwiches. And I've seen they did a good job of setting it in Chicago. I mean, where a lot of those places are and stuff when you're around here, but it's a between a fiver and dimer for me. I've probably seen it 8-9 times. It's just almost a dimer level, but way past fiver. And my fiance makes me watch it a lot of times too, because she, having grown up in Cicero, right outside of Chicago, she really she enjoys watching it as well. And it's a really good movie, really good ending on it too.
It's the ultimate, not a double cross, but just a plot twist at the end. Like you don't see it coming. And you're right, Ed Norton. This was Ed Norton's coming out party. Like here's a guy nobody knew who he was. He went to Yale. He worked a few months in Japan before moving to Manhattan to pursue an acting career. This movie comes out in '96, and another one I didn't see it in the theater. And somebody said you got to see Primal Fear. It's Richard Gere plays that role as the cocky. Almost every role that Richard Gere plays, he's cocky something, much like Denzel, much like Tom Cruise. But they do it so well that you're okay with it. Like you're like, yeah, okay, I've kind of seen this Richard Gere before, but he's so good at it that you're like, yeah. And Ed Norton is phenomenal in this movie. Think about this run for Norton. Norton started his career. He's on a heater. He does this movie. He does American History X, which is, again, deep and disturbing, but unbelievable. And his performance in that, how he didn't win an Oscar, I'm not sure. So he does Primal Fear, American History X, and Fight Club in like a 3-year span. Comes out of the gate strong. Then it's Keeping the Faith, Down in the
Mm.
Valley, Painted Veil, The Score. 25th Hour is pretty good. Great cast in that movie. That's a
The
Spike Lee
Score may
film.
be the most disappointing movie I've ever
I
of
never
all
saw
time.
that.
Dude, you look at it, it's like you got Ed Norton, you got Robert De Niro, and then Marlon Brando. That's one of his last movies. Marlon Brando's in it. Now, Frank Oz directed it, and that's the infamous off-screen rant that Brando went on when he kept calling Frank Oz Miss Piggy, because Frank Oz, of course, was the voice of Miss Piggy and Grover and several of our beloved Jim Henson characters. And he said, he refused to stand for any of his scenes. I mean, it was wild. It was wild. And I was all fired up because I'm a big Brando guy, right? And I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be good because I love De Niro too, and Norton's a star, and it just, I don't know, man. It's just kind of a bleh. So anyway,
Okay. Well, that's another segment entirely, but
I know.
I never saw it. But I'll give Primal Fear. I'm with you. I'm between a fiver and a dimer. Like it's probably somewhere in the like seven to eight range. But if it's on again, I'm gonna hit the dime mark with Primal Fear. Last
Yeah.
one, Any Given Sunday. Oliver Stone. Um, you've got Jamie Foxx bursting onto the scene as Willie Beeman. You've got Al Pacino playing a head coach. Every inch is a yard. Every yard is 10, and 10's a first down.
6 inches in front of your face.
Come on.
That's all it is, gentlemen.
Just pretend like you're in the hood and you're drawing up a play in the dirt. See,
Cameron Diaz is in that movie.
Well, typical. I mean, Oliver Stone at this point of his career, he picks up the phone to an A-list actor and says, "You want to play a small role?" And they say yes. Doesn't matter who it is. Nobody says no to Oliver during this time.
Dude,
and I've
Lawrence
said
Taylor was in the movie.
LL Cool J.
LL Cool J was in the
LL
movie.
Cool J played, what position was LL?
Running back. He was the running back.
So
LT was a linebacker.
How many stars did LL Cool J get coming out of high school?
James Woods was in this movie.
James Woods is in the movie. Ted McGinley, who's like in every Oliver Stone movie from Platoon to Wall Street On, is always good in everything. He plays like a Jim Rome. They basically dog Jim Rome with that character.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I love that guy. As far as
he's fantastic. He's the ultimate, like, that guy. He's great in everything he does.
He was in Office Space.
He's in Office Space.
He was one of the Bobs. Bobs. He's like,
what would you say? Not gonna work here. Yeah.
He's the one that had the classic line where we're talking about Michael Bolton. He was like, I celebrate his entire collection.
I celebrate his entire catalog. I mean, yeah, dude, I'm a fan, but you, with the same name, you must be an even bigger fan. He's terrific. So anyway, I'm going to have an unpopular take on this. All right. For me, this is a neither. I saw it once. I've watched it a couple times on cable. I'm not a fan. I think this is when Oliver Stone started to jump the shark. Natural Born Killers, this movie. I mean, Oliver Stone was so good there. It's like he just peaked and then. Now, I'll admit, I'm pretty harsh on sports movies. More often than not, they're a miss for me than a hit. This movie is so over the top. It's so just like. Again, it's Oliver Stone doing what Oliver Stone does. The acting is fine. I love Al Pacino. I didn't love him in this role. The Willie Beeman dynamic. It's like that. I don't know. For me, again, I know this is going to be I'm going to get crushed on social media for this because one thing I've learned already on these segments that we do, the Five and Dimer has a visceral reaction from our listeners. They either are like, yes, you nailed that, or like, how could you not like that movie? You crush me if you will. This is not a fiver or a dimer for me. This is a give it a shot. And there's some good scenes. Yes. They're always, it's an Oliver Stone movie, so the cast is going to be really good. But for the most part, it fell flat for me.
Look, I don't think you're kind of like you and I are, we don't agree on this because it's a double downer.
That's the beauty of the segment. We had
But
different taste.
but I also did not. I also like Natural Born Killers quite a bit, and I like
Yeah.
when Stone started going to this sort of I call it the internal monologue style of directing, where you have like quick cuts and Pacino when he's given that he uses the same technique in Natural Born Killers, where you see the actors and his voice, he's still talking, but you see his face and this emotion and stuff. I like that kind of stuff. Now, shortly after Any Given Sunday, I sort of jumped off the bandwagon, I was like, well, that was a good. And but I understand a lot of people that love football movies, and they didn't like it.
No.
A lot of people didn't care for Al Pacino. They thought this was way over the top. The story was kind of, even on the poster I'm looking at right now, it says "Life is a contact sport." Oh wow, yeah, clever. It had everybody under the sun, and I sort of I like the speech. I think the speech is iconic, and I think that based on Natural Born Killers, I felt like I said, during that point in time, after the Vietnam trilogy, that was great.
Which was awesome. Platoon, Born on the 4th of July.
And Heaven and Earth is very underrated.
I never saw that. Never saw Heaven and Earth.
That's part 3, or that's the third in the trilogy.
Oh, really?
It's got Tommy Lee Jones and an unknown actress.
Tommy Lee will always be Clay Shaw to me in JFK, but I will see it.
It was pretty solid. It's about coming home after the war.
Okay.
And starting a life and all that good stuff. It is a good one. I wish it was on more because I would watch it more. But so when he got,
do you think if Ricky wasn't shot dead, he would have had a better career than Willie Beeman?
Yes,
because Ricky he was shifty, had the wiggle. I like to believe he had hands, even though you didn't see it in the highlight tape. Wasn't afraid to put on a block. I just think Ricky would have been a 10-year NFL back, 11,500 yards, few Pro Bowls sprinkled in. He would have broken away from Doughboy and lived a nice life and raised a great family.
Going to Tailback U at the time too. That was
that's right.
Matt Leinart and those guys. It was They were
I don't think it
body
ends
left,
when,
student body right. So
I think Willie Beeman gets caught in a contract. He holds out, and teams are like, we don't want to deal with this crap. And they talk to Pacino. He's like, hey, he's got talent, but he's a handful, that guy. And I just
and he's going to an expansion team too at the end. Remember?
Right. Yeah, the Sharks.
I just took the job in Orlando.
Orlando. That's right.
And I just signed Willie Beeman.
I just signed Willie Beeman.
You're playing behind a terrible offensive line. You're getting
it's not going to work.
Getting run that first year, man.
Right.
Willie's
doing rap videos. My name is Willie Beeman. I keep it. Yeah.
I'm with you. Ricky probably would have made it, but I don't know that part of Stone. And to me, it was those movies, Natural Born Killers, and this one were sort of like almost cartoonish, like highly symbolic, and so it was kind of meant to be a little over the top, almost kind of a Tarantino's got a little bit of that in what he does, but
absolutely.
Anyway, so that's why I like Any Given Sunday, because I like Natural Born Killers. If you don't like Natural Born Killers, you're not going to like Any Given Sunday because they're shot the exact same way. And
that's right.
If Natural Born Killers annoyed you, Any Given Sunday
didn't annoy me. It just this is when I was like gung ho on Oliver Stone, because he did Platoon, Wall Street, Born on the 4th of July, JFK, The Doors, and I'm like, I'm buying stock on Stone. Like, I'm like, the next 20 years, this guy is going to be the best filmmaker of our time. And then he comes up with Natural Born Killers, which I saw, and I was just like, what the hell was that? It didn't connect with me. Nixon, although I'm fascinated with the 60s and I can't get enough documentaries and everything from that time frame, was a little bit of a swing and miss for me. And unlike JFK, where it was like carefully thought out, even if you didn't think he was right, Nixon was just a shot in the dark. Like, we're just throwing darts at the board with history, and whatever sticks and whatever doesn't. and then after that, I don't know what the hell he did. Like he just kind of fell off the face of the earth.
W.
He's always good for a historical documentary,
Mhm.
which he did on like Showtime, like the history of the earth or something. And I thought it was well done, but no, Stone just he just kind of mailed it in, I guess.
I
I
liked
don't know.
World Trade Center in '06 with Nicholas Cage. That was when
He was
he's
decent. Yeah,
now
I
it made me highly uncomfortable because I could not imagine being buried and pinned and stuff.
it was hard to
Ugh.
watch. Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard to watch, but I thought it was good.
I
W to
forgot about
me,
that movie. Good call.
W sort of sucked. I thought it was took a lot
W
of
was
unfair
awful.
shots.
Well, that's
And then there's
yeah.
Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, which
I was disappointed in that too.
it was a little nostalgic. It was kind of, to me, it was sort of like Coming to America too. A lot of good callbacks and nostalgic, but
Yeah.
you would not put that in. It's not like Godfather 2 by any stretch. You know what I'm saying?
No, if Shia LaBeouf was a player in on any given Sunday, what are we looking at? Free safety, kind of a John Lynch type. Yeah, I wasn't buying Shia LaBeouf, and I wasn't or any LaBeouf. Um, yeah, I couldn't get into that either. I wish Oliver could channel whatever he had, that magic that he had, but it's like some people just they have a story to tell. With him, it was Vietnam with an unmatched perspective of Vietnam because he went to Vietnam. He had an unmatched perspective of Wall Street because his father was a Wall Street broker, right? So he had inside information on all these topics. And then JFK, whether you believe it, the whole theory or not, it's a phenomenal movie. It really is, with an incredible cast. But after that, I just thought there was a steady decline. So for you, it sounds like it's a nickel or a dimer. Which one?
Nah, any given Sunday, it's a dimer plus.
It's
I
a
mean,
dimer. Okay, so a
kind of in
dimer for
between
you,
10 and 50. It's not quite. It's not a Franklin, but
not a
it's a dimer.
Franklin. I got you. All right, for
Plus.
me, it's a neither. But like I said, I know this is an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people who love that movie. They can't get enough of it. I mean, for me, football, there's better options out there. And to me, it was like all we needed was The Rock as the commissioner. Not The Rock.
Dude, that would amazing.
Who was the commissioner of the initial NFL? Oh, Vince McMahon. All we needed was Vince McMahon because this had a wrestling feel to it. The whole thing just to me felt like WWF in the 90s. So it was a little outrageous. Anyway, so that's what
Oliver
we have.
Stone wrote Scarface. Did we know that? The Brian
I
De
did know
Palma?
that, and he doesn't get enough credit for that. And if you watch the beginning of that movie, like the whole storyline, which is based on a true story, which is not unlike some of what's happening right now in our country, it he took a current event situation from 1980, like the end of the Jimmy Carter era, and he just wrote a script on it. And if you, I did a little deep dive on this. He found like actual police reports and like a lot of what you see in Scarface actually did happen, like someone getting chainsawed to death. Like these things, the drug cartels don't play around, folks. Wouldn't recommend a 3-night stay in Juarez anytime soon.
No.
But that's even though that's what like an over the top movie, it's still I mean Scarface. That's a Ben Franklin times 10. But it's so classic, and though that even though it's a little over the top, if you actually read the making of the movie, and a lot of that stuff is pretty believable, actually. It's and Pacino is just off the charts good in that.
Oh
movie.
yeah.
Anyway,
And Robert Loggia, my boy, is in that movie too.
Revolutio. You're gonna have
Give
to
me the
worry about the
Secretary.
cash you're getting.
Be the Secretary of Defense. Then wake him.
Now you just want a different movie on me with
yeah.
Logio.
Independence Day.
Independence Day.
Wait till we get to that one. I'm
boy.
embarrassed to say how many times I've seen that movie.
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't seen it. I know.
No, I'm not talking about the sequel. I'm talking about the first one.
No,
with
I never
Will
saw the
Smith and
original.
Jeff
Yeah, I never saw the original.
Yeah,
And one of my again, I'm going to have some unpopular takes on this. I'm okay with that. I'm secure enough in my personal taste that I know. I mean, I haven't seen the program, which you know, I got to get on. I acknowledge that.
I guess as one of our guests made a big deal out of that, and The
Yeah.
program, I liked it. They filmed it in Columbia, so
Williams Brice
obviously,
Stadium, you can see
yeah,
it.
the whole setup. But and then when they were filming it too, it's funny. South Carolina was their first year in the SEC, and one of the days they were filming the crowd shot, they actually beat Tennessee, got Johnny Majors fired.
That's
Years
right.
later, they got Philip Fulmer fired.
Yeah.
Philip
Yeah.
Fulmer took over Johnny Majors, but you could see some orange in the top of the stadium, like in the crowd shot. It's
Oh,
blurred
cool.
out, but you could see where those guys were.
Right.
They,
Right.
they shot it after that game and after another home game that year. So that
I mean,
was
you got Friday Night Lights, you got North Dallas 40, you got even Varsity Blues, as cheesy as it is kind of for me a likable football movie. Um, there's other football movies for me that I would put ahead of on any given Sunday. I don't know. I'm gonna get hammered for that. Such is life. All right.
I don't know that you will, because opinions are mixed on that movie, dude.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it could have been so much better. So
Yeah.
I was very disappointed, and I was disappointed in the sequel to Wall Street. And I'm just sorry, Oliver. I don't know if you and I could be boys. From what I hear, that friendship wouldn't last long. Oliver's a different cat. He's a different cat. All right. Our thanks again to Baldy for joining us. Brian Baldinger at the top as we continue our guest parade here in the off season. And thanks to all of you that have been tuning in. The website's been doing very well as well. jcandmorgan.com. Encourage you to check that out. And as always, JC, the reviews, those mean a lot of things. You know what I've learned since we started doing this? It's not just the podcast that we do that I love doing. And thankfully, you folks have made this worth doing, because we grow in the numbers, and it keeps expanding each and every kind of period, if you will. I've become a podcast guy, like to the point where when I go to the gym and when I do certain activities, like I'm listening to podcasts now more than anything. It really is. I'm not just saying this because we have one. It's the future in so many ways. Once you get past that initial, like, oh, this is new, this is different, a podcast, you realize, no, this is exactly the way I want it. You get to listen when you want to. You make the appointment, and you get to enjoy it. It's just, I don't know. And of course, we don't do a ton of commercials on this. We try to let it flow. But I find myself listening to a number of other podcasts that are really good as well.
Good thing about it is too, if you get in the car and like say you go, as opposed to live radio where you're going to miss the guest or whatever, if you got to run in the store,
right?
Podcast, you just pause it,
come
back.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
You're no longer. Yeah.
Yeah. I do have one thing to announce to our audience. I've got some, for your cooler, for your Yetis and all that. Summertime's here. I know people love to put stickers on their coolers. If you'd like to represent our podcast, email me with your name and address. It's jcandmorgan@gmail.com. JC and Morgan spelled out at gmail.com. Name and address, and I'll stick you for free a handy dandy JC and Morgan sticker in the mail, so you guys can represent. Some people put stickers on their cars, and hey, we're not going to complain. I don't really put stickers on my car, especially if it's.
I've got them on my Yeti.
But yeah, put it on your Yeti and rock and roll and represent us at the lake and your tailgates this fall. So
I like it.
So that's it. But yeah, first, let's say first 8 people to email me. I'll get those out to you.
Perfect. Love it. Giving away some swag.
Oh,
That's how we do here. We're just, before you know it, it's JC and Morgan t-shirts, JC and Morgan coolers, koozies.
Which that's a pretty good idea.
It's not
for
bad.
For JC.
How about a JC and Morgan bourbon? Can we start a distillery anytime soon? That's the future. I'm thinking
give some football player an NIL deal with it.
Yeah. So, all right, anyway. We're way over time. Appreciate everybody tuning in once again. We'll see you next week. He's JC. I'm Mike. So long.